All right. Ready to dive into the heart of China for this deep dive. You've given us some seriously interesting excerpts from this podcast, Empires in Mirror.
Yeah.
And we're going to unpack how echoes of ancient China are shaping its modern rise.
Right.
So emperors, surveillance tech, and this whole red thread of power thing connecting it all.
Yeah, and this isn't just going back in time,
Right.
Getting these connections, it can give you some serious insight into how China operates globally today.
Okay, so let's start with this red thread of power idea. Sounds kind of mystical, like out of a prophecy or something.
It's this idea that China's ancient power structures, the ones that held empires together for centuries, are still influencing how the country is rising today.
So less about emperors and dynasties, more about the Communist Party now.
Right, yeah. It's like this, you know how the Forbidden City had walls to protect the emperors? Today, things like internet censorship and the social credit system, those are the walls, the tools the Chinese Communist Party uses. It's fascinating how they've taken these age-old concepts of power and brought them into the digital age.
That's a really compelling way to put it. Now, the podcast we're exploring really dives deep into the mandate of heaven. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so that was how ancient Chinese emperors legitimized their rule. They believed they were like divinely chosen. And if things were good, harvests were good, people happy, it meant they had heaven's blessing.
Okay, like a divine performance review.
Exactly. But here's the catch. Natural disasters, economic turmoil, major uprisings, those were all seen as signs that an emperor had lost the mandate of heaven.
Uh-oh.
And losing it could mean rebellion, even their downfall.
Whoa, high stakes.
Yeah.
Talk about an incentive to keep the people content.
Absolutely. And it's not completely different from how the Chinese Communist Party, the CCP, operates today.
Okay, so how does the mandate of heaven relate to the Communist Party today? They're not exactly relying on divine intervention, are they?
Not in the literal sense, no. But the CCP's legitimacy rests heavily on delivering economic growth and stability. It's their way of showing the Chinese people they deserve to rule, just like those emperors of old.
That's a really interesting parallel. So if the CCP fails to deliver, if the economy falters or there's unrest, their grip on power could weaken.
Precisely. And we've seen echoes of this throughout history even recently. Take the 1989 Tiananmen Square protests, for example.
Right. That was a pivotal moment. How does that relate to the mandate of heaven, though?
Well, when the protests happened, it was a sign that a big chunk of the population felt like the CCP wasn't holding up their end of the bargain.
Okay.
They were unhappy, demanding more freedoms and reforms.
So the protests were a challenge to the CCP's legitimacy, their version of the mandate of heaven.
Exactly. And the CCP's response, the crackdown, that was their way of reasserting control, right? Showing they wouldn't tolerate challenges to their authority. Just like those emperors of old, they needed to maintain order and keep things stable to stay in power.
Yeah, that's a stark reminder that even though we're talking about these like ancient concepts, they can still have very real and powerful implications today. It's incredible how this red thread connects China's past to its present.
It really does. And it gets even more fascinating when we see how this red thread weaves its way through China's use of technology, but we can delve into that a bit later.
You've definitely piqued my interest there. This is already making me rethink how I understand China's rise.
Yeah.
You mentioned how this red thread of power connects to China's use of technology.
Yeah.
And I got to say, I'm really curious about that. It just seems like such a huge leap.
Yeah.
Right? From like ancient emperors to algorithms and AI and all that.
It is a huge leap, but it's funny. The underlying principle is surprisingly similar.
Okay, how so?
It's about control.
Control, okay.
Just like emperors built like fortresses and had all those guards, the CCP leverages technology to monitor and manage information, people, even how they behave.
So it's like the Great Wall, but digital?
Basically, yeah.
Okay.
Think about the Great Firewall.
Right.
That's China's way of controlling what information gets in and out of the country, right?
Yeah.
They filter out anything they see as a threat.
Makes sense. And then there's the social credit system.
Yeah.
Which, I got to be honest, that sounds like something straight out of sci-fi.
I know, right?
So how does that work exactly?
So basically, it's this complex system that uses tons of data to like track and score how citizens behave.
Bang.
Everything from, paying your bills on time to what you're doing online, it all factors in.
So like a credit score, but for your whole life.
Exactly.
Wow.
A high score gets you perks, like travel upgrades, easier loans, but a low score.
Yeah.
That can limit your opportunities, even like your freedom to travel.
Wow. That's That's kind of wild. It sounds incredibly effective for, maintaining control, but also a little creepy, to be honest.
Right. It's a double-edged sword, for sure.
Yeah.
On the one hand, the CCP says these technologies are, like, essential, right? To keep society stable, prevent crime, and grow the economy.
I can see how they'd argue that.
Right.
But what about the downsides? What are people saying about that?
Well, critics say these technologies, they stifle dissent, they limit personal freedom, and create this climate of self-censorship. Like, it's a way for the CCP to enforce their ideology and stay in power, but at what cost, at the expense of individual liberties.
So it sounds like a real balancing act for the CCP.
Totally.
They need to find that sweet spot.
Yeah.
Where tech enhances their control but doesn't completely stifle innovation, because that's what drives their growth.
You got it.
Right.
You hit the nail on the head. It's this constant juggling act.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating to watch how they're dealing with these challenges. Because here's the thing. China wants to be a global leader in tech, right?
Right.
They want to be at the forefront of AI, robotics, all that cutting edge stuff.
But how do they do that if they're limiting information and ideas? It seems like those two things contradict each other.
Yeah, they do, don't they? And that's the million-dollar question.
Right.
Can China become a tech superpower if they're controlling information and tech so tightly?
Yeah, it's like a paradox.
It is. It is.
They're trying to innovate, but within a system that seems designed to, prevent innovation.
Exactly. It's a paradox, and honestly, only time will tell how this plays out.
Right.
But it's a question with global implications, because as China gets more advanced, their influence on the world grows too.
It's crazy how all these things connect, like ancient history, modern tech, global ambitions. It's all woven together in China's story.
It really is.
It makes you wonder, if those ancient ideas about power are so deeply rooted in China, can they really adapt to, a globalized world?
Right. Or will those ideas be what holds them back in the end?
That's a big question.
It is.
And it brings us back to this whole red thread of power thing. Is it strong enough to guide China into the future?
Yeah. Yeah.
Or will it, unravel under the pressure?
That's what makes studying China so interesting.
Yeah.
Its ambition, innovation, this relentless pursuit of power that goes back thousands of years.
Right.
And how that plays out in the next few decades, it's going to impact all of us.
So we've been going on about this red thread of power from emperors to all this modern surveillance.
Yeah. Right.
But does this podcast, do they think it's going to hold strong, this thread? Or could it unravel?
That's a big question, right? And it's tough to say for sure. The people they talk to, experts in all sorts of stuff, they all seem to agree there are definitely parallels between ancient and modern China, especially when it comes to who has the power.
Yeah.
But they also said the world's a different place now, right? And China's changed with it.
Totally. I mean, back then, they didn't have to worry about global markets and international stuff the way China does now.
Exactly. Today's China, they're way more connected to everything than any dynasty ever was. Trade, investments, technology, they rely on all of it to keep growing and stay stable.
So how is that changing their whole approach to power then? Can they really keep such a tight grip when they're so interconnected with everyone else?
No, that is the billion-dollar question. It's like this weird tension.
How so?
On the one hand, the CCP, they're all about keeping their authority, right? Controlling information, making sure everything's stable. That's how they've held onto power for so long.
It's like their thing,
Exactly. But at the same time, they got to engage with the world, they got to innovate, they got to attract those foreign investments, and all that usually needs some level of openness, being transparent, which kind of goes against their whole control thing,
So they're trying to do two opposite things at once.
Pretty much. It's a balancing act, and everyone's watching to see if they can pull it off.
Will they figure out how to, reconcile this ancient need for control with how the world works now? Or will that be what trips them up in the end?
Who knows? But it definitely makes you think. And it shows just how important it is to understand history, not just as stuff that happened, but as something that's still affecting us today, even shaping the future.
Seriously. Feels like China's story is just getting started.
It does, doesn't it? And getting this whole dance between their past and present, that's the key to understanding where they might go next.
That's a wrap on our deep dive into ancient and modern China. It was kind of mind-blowing to see how much those echoes from the past are still shaping things today.
Yeah, it's a good reminder. History's never really over and done with. It's still here, whispering to us if we're willing to listen.
And on that note, we encourage all of you listening, to keep exploring, keep asking questions, keep diving deeper into these stories that make our world what it is. Until next time.